Hey guys, Danny Donuts here, and welcome to my wild card review of the upcoming Hearthstone expansion, Knights of the Frozen Throne. A little bit about me before we get started. I'm a writer on both the Wild Vicious Syndicate Data Reaper report, as well as the Wild Tempo Storm Meta Snapshot. I'm a co host on the Well Met podcast, and I'm a consistent Wild Legend player. Additionally, I'm a bit of a memer, so I like to sprinkle that in. For my review, I'm going to be looking at the cards in a wild perspective, based on the wild metagame that's currently going on, and seeing how these new cards are gonna influence it. Before we get started, you got to keep in mind some of the synergies that already exist in Wild may make a card stronger than in Standard. Something like in Ungoro, you'll have Light Fuse Stegodon, which doesn't have much play in Paladin, is actually incredibly powerful in Wild. So we're going to really try to highlight those as we go through this card reveal. Also, if I skip over some cards, we're going to be going through this relatively quickly, and the cards that are not good enough for Wild, I'm just going to skim over them. All right, without further ado, let's get started. So we're going to go in class order and then end up with the neutrals at the end. All right, starting with Druid. We have Druid of the Swarm. Choose one, transform into a 1/2 with Poisonous or a 1/5 with Taunt. So I actually see this as being a tech card that you can run in your Egg Druid list. If you're trying to play against counter the mid-range Paladin decks, this card actually might be pretty good. Because if you get it down early, the 1/5 will be able to protect your minions, similarly to how in Standard right now you have Tar Creeper being played to protect some of your other minions, and then you can buff them up afterwards. I think being at 2 mana will be good enough. I'm not really sure how the 1/2 option will really go in. Maybe if you're playing like a really control-y Druid deck, it'll fit in there. But I really see it as a tech card choice for Egg Druid. Crypt Lord, I really don't feel that this card is strong enough for Wild. It's comparable with Tar Creeper, and Tar Creeper really doesn't see too much play in Druid. I mean, you'll see it in Standard, in Egg Druid, and there in the Aggro Druid, but I don't think it's good enough for Egg Druid. And I think that the buff for the 1 health on this minion, on the 3 spot, is too small. On 2, you can play the previous card, Druid of the Swarm, and then buff it up afterwards. But on 3, you really want to be getting a little bit more bang for your buck. Gnash, I mean, I think this is just a worse Shield Slam, or what is it, Bash, from Control Warrior. And that card is barely run in Control Warrior. Yeah, I don't see this having much play. Even if Druid goes really control heavy with the taunts, this card's probably not going to make the cut. Speaking of a taunt Druid, this next card's, what is it, Strong Shell Scavenger. It's like a bolster on a body. I don't think that, if bolster doesn't work in Warrior, I really don't think that it's going to work in Druid. But you'll never know. We'll see if the taunt archetype really comes up, and then this card will actually be good. Otherwise, I say it's trash. All right, on to the next one. Fate Spinner. Well, this has a really cool effect. Blizzard is being a little cautious with printing this. I think that the only time you would ever try to play something like this is maybe like a really slow version of Egg Druid. You'd have to completely rebuild the deck around this, and because you want to have both of the effects be good, and there's not really a deck that would have that. I don't like it. On to Spreading Plague, Unleash the Scarabs. So this card is actually really good against Paladin. And if there is a Taunt Druid, this card will most certainly be in that deck. The thing about it's a stall card essentially. You're gonna have to get some bigger minions that you'll play behind it, some more powerful effects, maybe a Sylvanas. Drop this on turn 9, stall your opponent out, Deathwing them. But essentially, it's just a stall card. And when you're a taunt druid, maybe you can get ahead. Maybe you can ramp up and get it out early, but you're really trying to stall until you get a bigger threat on board. Now, web weave. So Ben Brode and someone else had mentioned this in a tweet that they originally had this card at 4 mana. And I think that 4 mana, this card probably would see play in like some of these druid decks that are more mid-range control-ish, because you can't just ping away the spiders. Having the 2 health is actually really big. However, there are a lot better things that you can play on 5 that impact the board. The only time you really would want to play this is if you're playing up against a deck that doesn't have removal. Something like you don't want to play it against Reno Mage because they'll have a volcanic potion. But you want to play it up against, maybe if you're in the mirror against Taunt Druid and you're playing Taunt Druid, you'd want this card so you can play it down. But I think it's too slow for the metagame. And speaking of too slow, you have Ultimate Infestation. So there are 3 cards that when you add together come up with this. And if you have Shield Maiden from Warrior, if you have Starfire from Druid, and then you have Sprint from Rogue, add them together, you have this card. Crazy value, but you have to win the game on turn 10. If you're playing a 10 mana card, it needs to significantly point you to the win. And the impact of this, while it redraws you a bunch of cards, I don't think that it has enough of an impact, immediate impact at least. All right, on to the Druid legendaries. So we have Hadronox. Death Rattle, summon your taunt minions that died this game. So this is a really cool concept for a minion, and it would be a really, really strong card if it was on 8. On 9, though, you run into issues where the 9 mana cost slot is particularly weak because you can't really do much with the 1 mana if you're on 10. And at that point, you're just trying to maximize the amount of value that you're getting. The issue with this card is that it's a Death Rattle card. You want to be playing something that immediately affects the board if it's that high, just previously like the card before this. And I don't think that unless there's a really, really slow taunt druid deck and the meta completely slows down, this card is going to be way too slow. And the meta's not going to slow down because it's wild. We're going to have the same Pirate Warrior, the same aggro Shaman. We're just what this expansion really is going to do is give us tech cards to be able to play around the current iterations of the decks, and maybe we'll have a new archetype sneak in. But pretty much we're trying to get the best tech cards out of this expansion. So Hadronox, great meme. I'm going to play it in Mill Druid. You're essentially going to use it just like you're going to play a bunch of Belchers and some Death Lords, and then you play Curator, then you play Hadronox, and then you play Deathwing on top of that, and kill all your board, and then you just have a wall of taunt for days. All right, now on to the Death Knight hero, Malfurion the Pestilent. So the big thing about these Death Lords is looking at both their battle cry effect and how good their hero power is. So the hero power for this is Plague Lord, choose 1+3 armor or gain 3 armor. Now, this effect is actually pretty good, independent of the card. We'll examine the battle cry later. I just want to look at the hero power. The hero power is incredibly strong. I've been messing around with Justicar recently in some of my Mill Druid, and obviously that's a meme. We all know that Mill Druid is a meme, but looking at the pure value that Justicar has, and you're getting 2 attack and 2 armor, there's a lot of times where I'm feeling, man, I wish I had 3 attack to kill this Manatide Totem or this Flame Tongue Totem. A lot of, or any of the pirates. You have like the 2 mana 2/3 one that gets buffed with your weapon. You always want to have 3 attack with a lot of the minions in the metagame. So that is very good. And then having a slightly worse tank up in Druid is also very, very good. So if you ever are playing a control style Druid, this hero power alone for 7 mana, I think might be worth it. And now the battle cry, summoning the scarabs or the spiders, that will further improve your game plan. If you're trying to ward off against aggro, you can play the taunt ones. Or if you have a bunch of really big minions on the board from your opponent, like 2 or 3 really big ones, you play the poisonous spiders and you force your opponent to have removal. So I actually think that this hero is going to be very, very good in Wild, especially if you're going to have some of the better taunts, something like Sludge Belcher. This is going to fit into a lot of the slower ramp Druid decks. Okay, now let's move on to Hunter. Play Dead. Trigger friendly minions death rattle. So this is similar to Feign Death, and there's been an egg hunter list going around with all the death rattle cards. I think someone on China got rank 1 with it. The list was on Twitter, and I can post it later. But this card, I think, is a little bit better than Feign Death, because I played that deck. And at best, in a really close matchup, Feign Death hits 1, maybe 2 minions, if it's close. If you're ahead and you have your entire board full of death rattles, it doesn't matter. You have your board full with death rattles. You're looking for that opportunity where you have like 1 extra mana, and having this on 1 mana, you can sneak in an extra, like on turn 7, you can play Sylvanas and steal a minion, and that's incredibly powerful. So I definitely think that Play Dead is going to fit into the Death Rattle Hunter deck, and that the card, I'm not sure if you're going to completely replace Feign Death. You might run both of them. I'm going to have to test that out, but you're definitely playing this card. All right, Toxic Arrow. I actually don't like this card. The dealing 2 damage to a minion if it survives gives it poisonous. You already have, Arcane Shot that deals 2 damage normally, and that's 1 mana. And then damaging your own minions in Hunter is typically not too good. I mean, you're a hunter, so most of your minions are aggressively statted. So you attack something, you'll have a higher attack, lower health. You're going to be put in a very dangerous situation, and you're trading up. So I think that they're trying to print this for like a control hunter, but I don't think it's good enough. Now, Venom Strike Trap. When one of your minions is attacked, summon a 2/3 poisonous cobra. I don't know, man. This looks like a worse Snake Trap to me. The Snake Trap is good because it's good in certain metas at least, because you can play Knife Juggler and get 3 free juggles with it. Otherwise, that secret is pretty bad. So getting the poisonous minion on the board is great, but you get it on the board when it's your opponent's turn. If you're close with your opponent, if they're trading into your minion, right, they are typically either ahead or they're even with you. And if they're ahead, they'll just kill the Cobra. They'll trade something into it, some middle-sized minion. If they're even, it's a little bit better, but and if they're behind, they're going face. They're not going to be trading into your minions. So I don't know. I don't think that this will be good enough to see play. Maybe you tech it in if you start playing like a Secret Hunter, but I don't think that archetype is good enough at the moment to come out. Bear Shark. This card's not even close to being good enough to be played in Wild. You have so many good 3-drops in Hunter. I'm just gonna skip it. It'll be great in with the Hunter Death Knight, but it's complete garbage as normal Wild 3-drop. So on the Stitch Tracker, I'm actually pretty impressed by this card. Discovering a copy of a minion in your deck. Essentially, this is a draw. Drawing any minion from your deck is going to be great because you create a copy of it. It's essentially the Shadow Visions for Hunter. And Hunter wants minions. They don't want spells. Priest wants spells. Hunter wants minions. So I think that this effect in Hunter is going to be very, very powerful. Even if you hit like a smaller minion, like a three attack minion, you're going to be pretty good with this because you get to choose what it is. And typically, if you're playing this, you're playing it into a mid game or late game Hunter. You're going to have bigger minions in that deck, so that'll be good. Exploding Bloatbat, Death Rattle, deal 2 damage to all enemy minions. So having the 1 health here really shows that Blizzard wants this to be used as a board clear. It's really easy to remove 1 mana or 1 health minions. But your opponent, so you're going to play, if you play this against something like Egg Druid or Pirate Warrior, they're probably just going to ignore it because it will clear their entire board. I think that this effect is actually pretty powerful, and if you're teching against aggressive decks, you might want to slip this in. Corpse Widow, 5 mana, 4/6. Your Death Rattle cards cost 2 less. Personally, I think that this card is too expensive. If you have something that discounts another card, that's really good, but you're at 5 mana playing this card, and the advantage that you want to sneak out from it, you're getting that advantage on turn 5. If this was a 3 mana, even like a 3 mana 2/2, 1/2, it would be great. But you have to wait until turn 5 to play this, and then you combo things in. Sure, you might be able to sneak in an extra 2-drop on turn 5, but if you're contesting for board, this gets cleared relatively easily. I don't think that it's good enough in Wild. Might see some play in Standard, but this doesn't fit the Death Rattle deck in Wild. Abominable Bowman, 7 mana, 6/7. Death Rattle, summon a random friendly beast that died this game. Man, this is so slow. This is like your Dr. Boom turn. Do you really want to... is a 6 mana or a 6/7 worth with a Death Rattle, summon a friendly beast that died this game better than Dr. Boom? Well, it plays around BGH. No. I don't think that this card would be played immediately. You would have to definitely build a deck around this. You'll have to have a bunch of beasts that are powerful. The new Lifesteal beast that we're going to come to later in the neutrals is actually a pretty good beast that you might want to get off of this. Most of the time, though, I think that you have stronger 7-cost minions in Wilds. You'll have, I don't know, Dr. Boom is just so much better. Alright, on to the legendaries. We have Professor Pugicide. After you play a secret, put a random hunter secret into the battlefield. I don't know. I don't think Blizzard gave Hunter that many good tools. This legendary should have been better. I don't really like how... I mean, it'll be great in the dream scenario where you can get multiple secrets off. But in order to do that, you have to put down a Cloaked Huntress, have it survive, and not play the secrets on that turn, and then play this. Or you have to wait until turn 7, and if you're waiting till turn 7 to make a combo go off in Hunter, you've lost the board already. You're holding on a couple secrets, this Cloaked Huntress. Unless this effect is crazy, which it's not, you can play around these secrets relatively easily. I mean, we've had enough experience with Secret Paladin and the Secret Mage. We can play around secrets if you know how to do it. So I don't think that this card is good enough. However, our Death Knight hero, Deathstalker Rexar, deal 2 damage to all enemy minions, and we have the hero power over here, which is the new Build-A-Beast. Now, one of the big issues that Hunter runs into is card draw if you're playing Control Hunter. Specifically, looking at the memes that I have tried, you have Reno Hunter, where if Reno Hunter gets to the late game, you really start to struggle against other decks, because other decks have a lot of card draw built in. If you're playing like a Reno Mage, you have Arcane Intellect. A lot of them put in, they'll put in like an Acolyte of Pain, ping that off. And you don't really get that much card draw on Hunter because it would get abused by aggressive Hunter decks to get the draw, and they'll just burn you out. So I think this might actually be a relatively good replacement for card draw. Essentially, consider it it's better than card draw, to be perfectly honest, because you can create, like a Kazaka's potion, you can create a beast for the moment that you need. However, it's going to be 2 mana more than you're looking for. 2 mana more than normal if you were going to create a beast, have that beast be there. But the beast is typically going to be more powerful than a normal beast, and consider it a 2 mana, like you're life tapping into that beast. That's the way I view this, and I think that this card is actually going to support some mid Hunter, and we're probably going to have Hunter not be bad, or as bad, the bottom class in Wild, due to this card alone. Alright, now let's move on to Mage. Breath of Sindragosa. Deal 2 damage to a random enemy minion and freeze it. Yeah, we already have a 1 mana deal 2 damage in Wilds. What is it? Arcane Blast. And you're typically using that because of the spell power multiplier with Thalnos. I don't think that, unless you build a specifically freeze-specific deck, which you're not, the synergy, I don't believe, is there. Yeah, I don't think you play this card. Ice Walker. So 2 mana, your hero power freezes the target. So that's a cool effect, but you gotta imagine, when would you play this, right? You'd play this in a Reno Mage style deck. You might sneak it into a Freeze Mage deck. It's going to be difficult to fit into the Freeze Mage deck because those lists are very, very tight. You're cutting cards and messing around with Freeze Mage is actually very difficult because of the Ice Lance combo. However, this card actually works pretty well with Ice Lance because you ping your opponent's face, that freezes it, and then you can Ice Lance. You might see this sneak into Freeze Mage, but it's still, the body's not strong enough. I don't know. Maybe as a tech card in Freeze Mage. You're not going to see it in Reno Mage. It's not strong enough for that. Cold Wraith, Battlecry. If an enemy is frozen, draw a card. Similar to the last card. I think this is similar to the last card, but a little bit worse. If you change your Freeze Mage from being the current freeze until your opponent is like their resources are wasted, and then burn them down into a more just basically freeze them forever and then burst them down with some later combo, I feel that you might sneak this in, but I don't think there's enough freeze effects. You have Frost Nova, you have this new Ice Waker, but a lot of them cost a lot of mana in order to play them. And having a 3 mana 3/4 needs to be really impactful on the board. And I don't think that, I mean, like, you're not playing minions in Freeze Mage. You're not playing it for the body. You're playing to draw and get burn damage and then kill your opponent. You're not fighting for the board. So this well-statted minion is not going to cut it. Doomed Apprentice. I mean, this is just a meme from Blizzard. It's interesting to have the effect where your opponent's spells cost 1 more. I mean, you could stop people from playing some combos and everything, but the low health really doesn't help. I don't think this is a good card. All right, Frost Clone. I'm actually really excited about this card. I think that Frost Clone will make Secret Mage a much stronger deck. And it's a much stronger deck only in the people who can build it right. So this now brings so many secrets that have an overlap. Because the Frost Clone with Mirror Entity, right? Normally, if you're playing Mirror Entity, you play a small minion up against it so that it gets duplicated. But most small minions that you play, unless it's a really early one drop or something, they are going to have a strong battle cry. You'll have, even if it's like in Mage, you'll play Babbling Book. Frost Clone will duplicate the Babbling Books, and you'd love to have two Babbling Books because the battle cry is fantastic. So now you're going to have people going, and if you're playing around this card, you might play something that'll slow your opponent down. Because Secret Mage is similar to Tempo Mage, where they need to burn you out. And if you get them and you control them, or you either have to burn them down faster than they can, or you have to out control them. And if you're burning them down and you play a really big minion, like a turn 7, you play Dr. Boom, right? And they get 2 Dr. Booms. If you kill them next turn, it doesn't matter. So sometimes it might be right to play a really big minion into this, if you're expecting it, which brings in the counterplay of Mirror Entity, right? So if people are just dropping Dr. Booms into this to try to go and burn them down, then you'll go and you'll Mirror Entity and you'll play a Dr. Boom on the board and they'll get one. So this really, how you build the deck is going to be very important. So what secrets you'll sneak into the deck. And if it's a meta that you think is really minion heavy, you'll be able to put in this Frost Clone and Mirror Entity. You'll cut like counter spell. But if you think it's like a freeze mage meta, you'll sneak in counter spell. You'll put in the Spellbender. You really have so much control and wild over Secret Mage, and this card is going to. I think this card's going to be very, very good. So Simulacrum, can't pronounce that. So the only thing I'm thinking about this definitely fits well with the Quest Mage, right? Copying the lowest cost minion in your hand, both of the finishers for Quest Mage, copying an Arcane Giant at 0, or copying a Sorcerer's Apprentice is very, very good. You might even play this. This will give you a little bit more flexibility in that deck. Speaking of the Quest Mage as well, you have the Ghastly Conjurer, and everyone's saying the mirror image. If you put the mirrored image in there, you get a free spell that's not in your deck. It's gonna advance it. I think that these two cards might push this deck into a little bit more of a viability. I don't know though. The deck is slow. The deck is very, very slow. And the meta has to slow down. It'll be really good if like this Taunt Druid comes up. If Taunt Druid, Control Warrior start taking place, these two cards will see a lot of play. Quest Mage will be really, really good. But, Quest Mage fares poorly against mid-range and aggro decks, which the meta is currently composed of. So unless you can realistically get the Mage quest done quickly, like very, very quickly, you're not going to see that. So I don't know. It depends on how the meta shifts, really. Glacial Mysteries, put one of each secret from your deck into the battlefield. So you might try playing this in the Secret Mage deck, but I don't think so. I don't think that it's going to be good enough. The big thing about Mysterious Challenger, right, is in Secret Paladin was the 6/6 body. The 6/6 body would absorb a lot of the buffs, and someone would try to attack into the 6/6 with a big minion, and then it would go and you'd get down, and then that would get avenged, and it would go down the chain. Here, having a bunch of secrets in Mage, you're gonna have to be playing Secret Mage. You can't go and put this in some like hybrid deck because you have to run a lot of secrets for this to be good. And I mean, having a bunch of secrets go on at the same time, having like Frost Clone and Mirror Entity go in is great, but you really just don't want to play as many secrets. I don't think that you want to play as many secrets as you need for this card to be good. Right now in Secret Mage, you probably run around what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 secrets, 8 secrets, maybe. Like for this to be good and to be played on played on turn 8, you're gonna need to run at least 10 to 12 secrets. And because secrets can be dead draws, you don't want to be playing your secrets for 3. You want to be sneaking them out with Mad Scientist. You want to Kazan Mystic them out. I don't think that you want to wait around until turn 8 to have some swing turn. Alright, Mage Legendaries. Sindragosa. 8 mana, 8/8, summon 2 0/1 Frozen Champions. So if any of you guys listen to Well Met, we reviewed this card earlier, and pretty much what I said was that you're not going to see this card played normally. No one's going to put this into your deck, but maybe you can build a Dragon Mage, and then you'll get it off of Netherspite Historian because of the class bonus and Discover. Yeah, so, but the thing is Dragon Mage good enough to play in the meta? Probably not. You do have some pretty cool tools for it, though, and you have a lot of burst. So it is a minion-centric deck. It's definitely going to be better than Dragon Paladin, but I think that the dragons are going to stay in Priest. You're not going to see too much of this card. Oh, but I can show you the Frozen Champion. Forgot to do that. The 0/1 Frozen Champion. Adding the random legendary minion to your hand. I mean, it's great, but it puts it in your hand. And as a mage, your game plan is to burn down your opponent. No matter what you're doing, if you're playing like a tempo mage, you're trying to burn your opponent down. If you're playing freeze mage, you're trying to stall them, then burn them down. Reno Mage really is the only one where you try to outvalue your opponent, but in the end, you're typically trying to get a finisher where you burn them down. And I think that this card is slow. It's too slow to really start burning your opponent down. That's pretty much it. Alright, so Frost Lich Jaina. 9 mana, man. 9 mana. I think this would be awesome if it was an 8 mana card, because then you could ping on it. Oh, and your hero power is Icy Touch. Deal 1 damage. If this kills a minion, summon a water elemental. And have your battle cry being summon a 3/6 water elemental. Your elementals have lifesteal for the rest of the game. I mean, you're going to see people try to build this deck up with a bunch of elementals, and you have some very powerful elementals in Wild. You're going to have Ragnaros, you're going to have, I don't know if there's any other exclusive Wild ones. Ragnaros is very good, though. Baron Geddon has a pretty cool effect for a board clear. It clears the board and it heals you up for how much damage it did, so that's going to be very strong. You're going to put that in the deck if you play it. I don't know, though. I don't think that we have enough of enough synergy for elementals at this moment. I don't think that it's going to be good enough. On to Paladin. Righteous Defender. Taunt Divine Shield. So, I don't know what Blizzard was thinking when they printed this card, right? Argent Squire is good enough to see some play. I mean, if you play my version of mid-range Paladin, I'm currently running a Divine Shield package, and I'm playing Argent Squire in the deck. You used to see Argent Squire in some of the aggressive decks before Ungoro came out with Firefly. You would see it in Egg Druid, and you still do in certain variations that aren't neck decked from control. Um, but this card is so much better. Like beyond belief, this one drop is like really good for Paladin. It's good both in the early game and the mid game. Early game, you get this. Your anything you play behind this, your opponent has to trade into this twice. So it's going to stay around. You can get a little buff on it if you're doing some of the little buffs. And if you're doing Divine Shield synergy, which you're going to want to be doing based off of the legendary of this class, um, this card is just perfect for it. Additionally, if you're in the mid game, right, and you get this card, you curve out, and turn 5, you play Light Fuse Stegodon, maybe you hit a couple of recruits that you have on board, and then you play the Righteous Defender. Now, normally your opponent would go and trade into some of the recruits, but unless they have the board clear, now they have to bump into the Righteous Defender twice, which that's just crazy. I think that this card is going to be very, very good. Now, Desperate Stand, I don't think that this card's going to be too good in Paladin because, I mean, the effect is okay in Control Shaman, right? The similar effect with I don't remember the Reincarnate. Well, it's not Reincarnate. It's Ancestral Spirit or whatever it is. The effect is only good in Shaman because it plays into the Death Rattle theme of the deck. Unless you build a really Death Rattle centric Paladin, this card is not going to be particularly good. It might have some. I mean, I did see in the reveal today they used it on a Divine Shield minion, and that's pretty cool. But I think you have some better cards that you can play in the Divine Shield deck. Like, I would much rather play a mini bot over having this card because this is a win more card. Whereas once you have something on the board, you essentially will snowball with this card. But first, you got to get something on the board. And I think that I'm more of that this Divine Shield deck has to be more mid-rangey than control. So I think that this card, I mean, it's going to make some of the control lists. It'll see play, but I don't think it'll be good. It'll definitely see some play, but my opinion is that it's not going to be as good as other options. Dark Conviction, set a minion's attack and health to 3. So this is the same effect as Keeper of Oldamon. And I think that, I mean, I'm running Keeper of Oldamon in certain versions of my Paladin builds, especially if you're really trying to play against combo priests. That's the real matchup where you want that. But having this as a spell, getting it out early, I think you'd rather have it on the 3/4 body for 4. You can definitely wait because you're never going to need this early in the game, right? Turn 2, turn 3, your opponent's minions are going to be 3/3s at best, maybe a 3/4. You don't really want to reduce those in size. So I think that here you want to... This Keeper of Oldamon outclasses this card. Howling Commander, Battlecry, draw a Divine Shield minion from your deck. So everyone's saying, oh, this is a draw Tyrion from your deck. You want to play this because of the tutor effect for it. And drawing a card is pretty good. But you typically want to tutor cards like that on curve. So if this was like a 7 mana thing with a relatively sized body and you curved into Tyrion, that'd be great. But there aren't any 4 mana, off the top of my head, I don't know of any Divine Shield minions that are 4 cost that you would want to curve into with this. So I don't know. A card draw is not really that important in Paladin that early in the game because you're trying to take the board and put pressure on your opponent. You're not really trying to get value for your late game, unless you're playing a really heavy control Paladin, which I don't feel comfortable playing that deck in Wild because of the vast amount of aggro. And the aggro has enough reach that control Paladin it's a bad matchup. All right, next set of Paladin cards. Arrogant Crusader, Death Rattle. If your opponent turns, summon a 2/2 ghoul. So this is pretty cool. If you kill this, if your opponent lets this live, right, and you trade this in, they don't get the ghoul, but you're never trading this in because of how aggressively statted it is. So you're always going face with this. So your opponent will typically attack into it. If your opponent's playing board control, they won't feel bad about trading a 2-drop into this, but they'll feel really bad about trading a 4-drop into it. I don't think you'll fit this into... It's not strong enough for Wild, but you might see this in Standard. Chillblade Champion. This was the one of the first Lifesteal cards that we saw. And based off of Ungoro and just off the track record of the initial cards that were shown, they weren't as powerful, the first ones. But that's just a side fact. I really think that this card, it's not powerful enough. And you find me saying that a lot, right? But it's Wild. There are a lot of cards that don't make the cut because they're better cards. Like Light Sorrow. You see some of the aggro, not aggro, but like the hybrid mid-range style Paladin decks, they're cutting True Silver. So do you think that Light Sorrow is going to ever be better than True Silver? You gotta kill... Having the 4 durability helps. But I don't know. I'm not optimistic about this card. I think that a weapon like this has to have an immediate impact. And at most, on one turn, I think that you're going to go and boost your Divine Shield. Maybe get 1 Divine Shield, get 2. But you're really going to have to hold on to this. And maybe you get some Wombo combo, but I don't think that's good enough. I haven't really thought much about Blackguard. Whenever your hero is healed, deal that much damage to a random enemy minion. You have a lot of really good heals in Wild that are not in Standard. You have the Heal Bot, Turkestar, the Jouster card, the 5-mana 5/5. So if you really want to sneak in healing, this will be good. This synergizes well with the Death Knight. Yeah, so if you're playing a Death Knight, you'll probably play this. And it's also, this card is better than it looks because it deals it to a random enemy minion. Dealing to the enemy minion gives you board control, and with, you're healing your hero, so you want board control. Being able to heal your hero and get board control is a win-win. So this will see play in some of the control Paladin decks. Alright, Bolvar Fireblood. I'm calling it here, folks. I think that this card is going to be the best card released in the expansion. No joke. I think that Bolvar Fireblood is going to be the most powerful card. So right now, before this expansion even comes out, before you get all of the Divine Shield tech, we're currently running Divine Shield Paladin. If you look at the Tempo Storm meta snapshot for this past month, you'll look and you'll see the Paladin list. I put it up there, but it's a Divine Shield deck. And the Divine Shield synergy is super beneficial. I think that deck, may plus or minus a couple cards, is probably the strongest deck in the meta right now. So you add in a card that synergizes really well with it in the 5 spot, which the Paladin doesn't have many cards in the 5 spot, except for Stand Against Darkness, which... Is that Stand Against Darkness? Yeah, that is. But that card, I've had some arguments with people recently about how necessary that card is, and I don't think that it's good enough. I was speaking with Alb, the Wild Champion, and he thinks that it's close enough to be cut from the deck. So we had some good arguments about that. But anyway, I digress. I think that this card is going to be the most powerful card of the expansion. This is going to be the first legendary that I craft after opening all the packs, and I have it. If I don't get this, I will craft this. And Uther of the Ebon Blade. So there's been a lot of hype about this card, and I'm not sure that it really lives up to that hype. 9 mana is tough to get to. But you're gonna only play this in control Paladin. If you're playing this in a mid-range Paladin, 9 cost is too much. It curves right after Tyrion, but you're gonna have it as a dead draw for so long. You're only gonna play this in a control Paladin, and a control Paladin, right? You're going to build up your opponent's not going to be clearing your board as much in control Paladin. So I didn't show I didn't show the hero power. Hero power is summon the 4 horsemen that are 2/2 minions. If you have all 4 of them, destroy the enemy hero. So I don't think you ever win with this card with the hero power. If you win with the hero power, then you should have beaten your opponent before you had the ability to do that. Your opponent's all out of resources at that point. And unless you play an incredibly greedy control deck or an OTK, we'll get back to the OTK in a little bit, but unless you play a really control-y style deck, you're not going to get this off. You're really looking for the weapon that you get, right? The corrupted Ashbringer. I don't know what the name of the weapon is, but having the lifesteal on that, being able to swing into anything is crazy. The weapon is what is powering this card, not the hero power. The hero power essentially is like a Justicar for the hero power. Consider it an alternative Justicar that occasionally, if your opponent gets really far behind, you'll lose they lose the game. But if they're that behind, they're probably going to lose the game anyway, so it's not that important. You're more looking for the board control that you get with the 5/3 weapon. Now, back onto the OTK. So in Wild, you actually have a sneaky OTK. So one of the things you need to note about the hero power is that each horseman is different, similar to like the Shaman totems. So you'll roll a random one when you get the hero power. So the thing is that you have Garrison Commander in Wild. So the combo, the first combo that I thought of, and it's actually pretty good, you don't need any Emperor ticks, because we saw in the video today that these tokens cost 2. You're going to go in and take the 2/2 horsemen. You're gonna play Uther one turn. Your next turn, you're gonna play Garrison Commander. You're gonna hero power twice. That's 6 mana, and then you play double Youthful Brewmaster, taking the minions back into your hand. From that point, your opponent is going to clear the Garrison Commander, but you have to have a second one essentially. So it's a 4 card combo where you have 2 Youthful Brewmasters, 2 Garrison Commanders, and over 3 turns, unless your opponent has like a Dirty Rat or something, which might be, if this OTK is any good, you might start seeing Dirty Rat come in. The issue is that you got to get through your entire deck, and this 4 card combo, it's important to see that the 4 card combo doesn't require Emperor Thorson, which makes it much better. One of the issues with like the Warlock combo with the Leroy combo is you have to wait for the Emperor ticks to be able to get the 20 damage. You just need the cards here, and if you draw the cards, you'll be able to get it off. But that's how I see that hero power winning games. If you're playing it for like a control style and as like an alternative win condition, don't, because if you ever have 4 2/2 hero powers on the board, you're already winning that game. It doesn't matter that you automatically win the game. Your opponent's already dead. Alrighty, let's move on to Priest. All right, we're going to speed this up. If we get into any really, really bad cards, I'm just going to skim over them. Yeah, like Shadow Ascendant, not too good. You won't see that. Spirit Lash, Lifesteal. You might see this in some combo Priest. You can cut Wild to Pyro. We'll mess around with the build of this, but you might see this as a one of in combo Priest. Maybe if you can find if you find a reason to cut Pyro, you can fit 2 of these in. Acolyte of Agony. This is an arena card. Eternal Servitude. Excuse me. This will go and lead into some OTK combos. You kill off Velen, and then you play the Eternal Servitude. this is like a super resurrect, I guess, but it costs more. And Resurrect Priest was okay back in the day. I think that you have some better Resurrect targets in Wild. But I just don't think that the only reason you play this is if you can get a Res Priest to be saturated with Resurrect effects. If you become saturated with it, then you can sneak this in. And then you also have the uses for the OTK decks. You're always going to have OTK decks. It's how viable are they? And a lot of the OTK deck that's the strongest in the game right now is Combo Priests, the Inner Fire, Divine Shield one. And that has you dead turn 3 sometimes, turn 4. You don't want to have to wait until you get to play Velen on what is Velen, 8, 9. I don't know how much Velen is, to be honest. It's how often I play it. But you don't want to have to wait until you play Velen. I think it's 8, and then from there have to Eternal Servitude. It's too slow. It'll be fun to try it out, and it'll be great on Trollden, but it's not good enough to be played. Devour Mind. So Thought Steal on steroids. It's essentially a nourish. I don't know. You don't see any control piece in the meta at the moment. I do think this is better than Thought Steal because of the extra card. Normally, if you're playing a control priest, you're going to want to get as much value as possible. And I think that this card, you might see this run in some like really heavy control priest, but first that has to be a good deck. Embrace Darkness, choose an enemy minion at the start of your turn, gaining control of it. So similarly, in the 6th spot, you have Entomb. Would you rather have an Embrace Darkness or an Entomb? I don't know. I think that I think this card might be better against... But you're going to use both of these against control decks, right? You want to play Embrace Darkness when your control opponent puts down a really big minion, and then you just embrace it, and they either have to burn their own minion, or they'll just let you have it. Maybe they make the issue about it is that they still have a turn with the minion, right? So if you're even on the board, your opponent will trade. This is actually a pretty good from behind card. It's not if you're behind a little bit, this card will actually be pretty good because let's say they have 2 really big minions on the board, you steal one of them and then you can trade their minion into their other minion, which is pretty good. I don't know. I was originally going to say this card's bad, but it's starting to warm up to me. Yeah, we'll see it. I think we'll see it. Shadow Essence, summon a 5/5 copy of a random minion in your deck. I mean, we have Barnes. I don't think that you need to wait until turn 6 to have the Barnes effect. Having the 5/5 copy of a minion. I think that this OTK Pipe Dream type of deck is not going to be viable, so we're not going to see it. Obsidian Statue, really good card. It's weak to some hexes and polymorphs, but what isn't? So, this is typically going to be pretty good. If you can reach turn 9, which is a hard task, against Pirate Warrior, against Egg Druid, against Aggro Shaman, this will be a very good card. This will be a very, very good card. Because you'll get 8 health off of it. At least 8 health. No, the lifesteal is based off of the attack, right? So let's say they'll have to put 2 minions into it. Yeah, so it's 8, but the different way, not based off of the health, based off of the attack. So let's say they put 2 or 3 minions into it. You'll heal up a bunch, and then you can go, and you're playing this in a N'Zoth deck, essentially. That's what you're going to do. So you'll curve into this, play this, and then you play N'Zoth right after, and you win the game. So I think that this will fit into N'Zoth Priest. And I mean, we all know if you play Wild that there are a ton of Reno priests, and Reno priests typically will always play N'Zoth. So we're going to see a lot of this card. The question is, does this card make Reno priest better? And well, I think that if we skip ahead to our legendaries, the Death Knight, maybe it might be good enough. We'll see. So on to the legendaries. Archbishop Benedictus. Battlecry, shuffle a copy of your opponent's deck into your deck. So this blew my mind when I saw this effect. But the only time this is really good is if you're playing against another control deck. If you're playing against aggro, you don't really want aggressive cards. You want control cards. Maybe if you get some like Pirate Warrior weapons or something, you can clear their board, or you get like a Korkron Elite or something. But typically this card is going to be garbage against aggro. However, if you get because it's going to stop you from drawing your control tools. However, if you were playing in a control mirror, or if you're playing against like, I don't know, a Reno deck, if you're playing against a Control Warrior, if the meta slows down, you're going to get all of their cards. The issue that you run into with that is synergies. Like if you get a Shield Slam, even if from a Control Warrior, it's no good. But the thing is, you can still get some really good cards in that. You will definitely have some dead cards, which is why if you play this in Wild, you're definitely going to want to play something like Starseeker. Starseeker is going to be a really good card with this card, because then you're at the end of your, if you get to the end of your deck ever, you pretty much have won the game, right? But you're going to have your hand fill up with a bunch of cards that might not work well. You playing against a rogue and you get a bunch of rogue weapon buffs. What are you going to do with that? So you might want to sneak in an Elise and then just change them all to legendaries. I don't know. I don't think this card's good enough to see play. It's a 7 mana 4/6. Doesn't have much impact on the board, but the effect's pretty cool. All right, Shadow Reaper Anduin. This card makes me so sad. Destroy all minions with 5 or more attack. This will be great. Counter to Jade Druid. We do have the neutralist coming in, but this will clear the board against Jade Druid, and then essentially you have the OTK combo. You're going to look to have Void Form do an OTK combo. That's how you want to win with this card. Now, you can do it with the attrition game and just keep playing them down, Shadow Form. If you were watching the one-man pack tournament that I was in, you saw me use the Shadow Form Reno-less Reno deck. It was a tournament with a bunch of bans. Don't worry about how memey that sounds. It was actually pretty good. But from there, the hero power is good to control the board. Having 2 damage, essentially a double mage hero power, is actually pretty good. And having something that will that'll have refresh every single time you play a card is crazy. Add in Raza if you're playing a Reno deck, and this card is going to be bonkers. But we actually have a Reno. That's the big thing. Standard's not going to have Reno, so this card might be marginally good. Reno is going to make this card very good. You'll see play. This card will see play. There are enough people that play Reno Priest. Reno Priest seems to be everyone's favorite deck at lower levels. So we will most certainly see this. I'm definitely going to try out OTK combos. That's the only way that I think that this card is extremely good. It'll be good, but it won't be extremely good without an OTK combo. Kappa. Alright, on to the next class. Rogue. Doomerang. Throw your weapon at a minion, it deals damage and returns to your hand. Doesn't fit into any current rogue archetypes. There's not going to be a rogue weapon archetype. No matter how much you push it, I don't think you see it. Roll the Bones. Death Rattle. In order for this to be good, I think you have to have around 15. You have to hit a Death Rattle card 1 out of every 2, because your first draw, typically, the way that Blizzard stats it, your first draw is worth 1 mana, and your second draw is typically worth 2 mana. So if you look at Arcane Intellect, the first draw is 1, the second one is worth 2. If you look at Nourish, you have the first draw being 1, second draw being 2, third draw being 2. So I think for this one to be good, you need to at least draw 2. And to do that, statistically, you need to have 15 Death Rattles in your deck. If you have a Death Rattle rogue deck, you're typically going to play Jades because that's the strongest Death Rattle. You're going to sneak Jades into there. And with that, I think you probably play 7 or 8 Death Rattles. Maybe more. You might play like 10. But I don't think this is going to be good enough in that deck. Vampiric Poison, give your weapon lifesteal. If you get a bunch of weapon buffs, great. I don't think that's going to be good enough. You're going to put way too much effort into doing something that we can just burst them down anyway. Plague Scientist. Nice arena card. Shadowblade, your hero's immune this turn. Unless you have weapon... I don't see weapon buffs being good enough in Rogue. You always do have a weapon, and it does buff things, but I don't personally believe that these weapon cards are going to be good enough. And same with Runeforged, Haunter. I don't think that that's going to be a good enough type of rogue. It's going to try to spawn an archetype in Standard, but when you have the stronger versions of the deck, of like Miracle, where you're going to go and burn them down with Leroy, or you actually get some more combo potential with the new Death Knight hero, I don't think that weapons are going to be the type of deck that you want to play. Bone Baron, add 2 1/1 skeletons to your hand. This is trying to synergize with like combo cards. I don't know. I'd rather play... I don't like the stats on this. I'd rather play Azure Drake and then just draw to cycle. I don't want to go and play a lot of combo stuff. I just want to draw on my rogue decks. Spectral Pillager, same thing. When you're comboing, I don't really like dealing I do like dealing damage, but I don't feel that this will be strong enough. Edwin is a really good combo card, one of the only good combo cards, because of how broken it is. You get your mana's worth with 2 cards. 3 mana 6/6 is good enough. From there, like if you get a 3 mana, like the crazy combos that'll get you a 12 and a 10, 12, Edwin are the ones, is why that card is really good. You're never going to get anything, if you're playing this for 6 mana, you're not going to play more than 3 or 4 cards. So is a 6 mana 5/5 deal 3 damage good enough? Not particularly. Especially seeing that those cards are all going to be low cost. They're not impactful to the board. I don't think you're going to play that. On to the heroes. Lillian Voss. Replace the spells in your hand with random spells from your opponent's class. So this might actually be better in Wild than Standard because you have all of the burgle effects, right? And one of the weakness of burgle effects is that you might get a card that doesn't synergize with your deck, right? You're playing against a warrior, you get a shield slam. You're playing against Druid and you get a buff and you're not playing many minions. So any of the weapons, any of the spells that you get that are really weak, you go and you'll play Lillian Voss and hopefully you'll get a second reroll on those spells. So that's what you want to use this as. You can also use it as you get a bunch of really cheap spells, like that are the petals from the plants from Ungoro. You get a couple of those, and they're 1 mana deal 1s, and you turn them to actual spells. I think that's better in Wild, but I don't think it's good enough to have its own archetype. Now on to the rogue hero, Valera the Hollow. Battlecry gains stealth until your next turn. I don't think so. But now the hero power is what's going to be really good about this. The stealth, great, it'll stall your opponent, it'll give you 1 extra turn to do a combo. But the real power behind this card is going to be the hero power. You're going to get a lot more reach with things. You're mostly going to see this with like a Leroy burst, right? You have Leroy, then you have 2 copies of Cold Blood in your hand, you play 2 of them, and then you get an extra 3rd one, and then you Abyss Phase. So you get a bunch of burst from there. Maybe you get an Emperor Thorison Tick on them. So you get Leroy down to 4, and then you have 2 0-cost Cold Bloods. You play Leroy, you buff them up with 2. You play the third one, you faceless it, they're dead. So that'll be really good. That's the only way you play this Death Shadow. And I mean, you're going to see Dane play some of this. You're going to see the Bran OTKs. But the big thing about that is he needs to... It'll make it easier, but for that style of deck, you get overrun by aggro. The thing about his videos is that you always see him playing against some type of control deck, because the games against the aggro decks, you pretty much lose. Alright, on to the next class. Shaman. Warlock. Freeze an enemy. I don't like this expansion. I don't think that the synergy for freeze is good enough. So we can just take Warlock and Cryostasis. I don't think that those 2 cards are good enough. Ice Fishing, draw 2 Murlocs from your deck. This will be interesting. Murloc Quest was almost good enough, because you typically... The best way that I found to play that deck was to play a aggro Shaman core, but then you sneak in, you play the core of the aggro Shaman, and to make it a mid-range style deck, you play the really good Murloc. So you play the Bluegills, the War Leaders, you play Murk-Eye, Finja, and then you play the Call and the Finishers, and everything is awesome. So from there, Ice Fishing fits well into that deck. You'd have to build it a little bit more mid-rangey. You'll have to take out the aggro core, but you'll be able to get the quest off, and the quest will just fill up your hand. I'm not even sure if you want to play the quest with that, though. Similar to, like, Priest, if you're playing, like, Reno Priest, I believe, is stronger without the quest at the moment. And a lot of people agree with that. So I don't know, maybe playing this card, you might just have a straight up Murloc Shaman, without the quest at all. That'll be interesting to look at. The Defender, yeah, you have Deathlord, which is a better version of this card. I would much rather have my opponent put a random minion into the play, especially if you're playing against a more aggressive meta, because you'll get a free 1/1, 2/2, whatever on the board. The Overload for 3 the next turn is brutal. That's game changing. You'll play this on 3, and then you only have 1 mana afterwards. Your opponent, if you're playing an aggressive deck, might burst through. Typically what you want to do with Deathlord in Shaman is you'll let your opponent you play the Deathlord when their board is full. They'll trade all their minions into it, and they'll get a free minion, but their current minions are reduced in health, and then you just Lightning Storm them. With this, you don't have any follow-up. You have to play this in the mid-game. It's not good enough. Icebreaker, don't believe the freeze effects are going to be good. Skip it. I think that this next one, though, Avalanche, will be good enough to be played independent of the freeze effects. I think that it's essentially, consider it a meteor, but instead of doing the 15 damage and killing your opponent, you stall your opponent. Would you want to play a 4-mana stall your opponent and then on the other 2 sides damage it? I think so, especially in Shaman, where you're just trying to get a board up and then you'll bloodlust them down. This will be a really good tool for that, because you'll freeze the big minions and then they'll typically have the 2 smaller minions on the side. So you gotta start playing more positionally now that this card is in there. Voodoo Hexer, I mean, it's a good card. You definitely are going to have to spend at least 2 minions to kill it, maybe 3. And freezing the minions incentivizes you to trade differently than normal. You'll trade suboptimally because you'll maybe be left with 1 or 2 health points, and then you can Lightning Storm them. I think this might see some play independent of freeze effects. This card might be good for that. The real question is when does freeze become viable? If you have enough freeze effects in the deck, when do the subpar freeze effects become good? And I don't think that the Icebreaker or the previous Cryostasis or what's the other one before the Burlock, I don't think that they're good enough to, even though they're subpar, I don't think they're good enough to get into a synergistic deck because I don't think the synergy's there yet. Snow Fury Giant costs 1 less for each mana crystal if you overloaded. So in aggro shaman, how many mana crystals do you typically overload? You overload with Totem Golem, with Spirit, the Wolves, 4 mana 7/7, and all your burn spells. But the issue with this is, by that point, right, it'll be good. You might see this in like an aggro shaman. You'll have to slow it down a little bit to sneak it in, because you're not going to see this. So Totem Golem cost 1. You'll have Jade Claws 1. You're not going to see this till the late game. But imagine if you're playing and it's turn 7 and then you top deck this at like a 2 or 3 cost because you've been overloading. Aggro shaman will typically overload themselves very frequently. So you might get this out turn 7 as a 2 mana thing and combo with something else, or you can just sneak it out when you're overloaded. So that'll be very interesting. I think you might sneak this into aggro shaman. We'll check it out, but I don't know. Might not be good enough. Shaman. Marabi, similar to what I said, I don't think that the freeze effects are good. If the freeze effects are good, you're playing a really control shaman, which this card would be really good, but I don't think that the synergies are good enough. Thrall Deathseer. Transform your minions into random ones that cost 2 more, and the hero power is Transmute Spirit. Transform a friendly minion into a random one that costs 1 more. So right now in Wild, we're starting to see, you obviously will see standard decks on the ladder. Someone goes from standard to Wild. But one of the things that was very interesting we saw in the Vicious Syndicate Data Reaper report was that there were a lot of people playing pure Evolved Shaman, standard version only, on the Wild ladder. And they were doing pretty well. So obviously the versions of the deck that were playing some better wild cards like Haunted Creeper and some other additional Totem Golem, things like that, were doing better. But there were a lot of people playing that and it was doing pretty well. So I think that this card is going to be good in standard, and that deck is okay in Wild. So we're going to see this card. I think that you got to consider transforming your minions into ones that cost 2 more is actually much better than 1 Evolve. Because most of the time you're going to have a bunch of totems. And the issue you run into with totems, which is, it's not as big in Wild because of the variance, but you don't want to get a Doomsayer. That'll completely ruin your day. But if you have a 1 cost minion on the board, your totem, they'll jump over that 2 spot and they'll go to 3 cost minions, which are typically statted a little bit better than 2 drops. Mana cost worth. They have to be. So you'll see this card. It'll be pretty good. On to Warlock. Sanguine Reveler. Destroy a friendly minion, gain +2/+2. So if you play this, you're playing it in Zoo. You got to build your Zoo a little bit more Death Rattle centric. So like Egg, Haunted Creeper, stuff like that. Yeah, you could fit this in. The issue is that you have so many good 1-drops in the current version of Zoo. And the reason that Zoo is doing bad is because it does poorly against Pirate Warrior. Because Pirate Warrior is essentially a faster version of Zoo. You take control of the board and then you smack them down with weapons. Weapons are just completely broken in that deck. I think that unless you get a crazy start where you go and you coin out an Egg your first turn, and then you Sanguine Reveler, and then you Flame Imp, and so you have a 3/2, 3/3, and a 4/4. That sounds like a crazy play, but you have to have semi-regular plays like that in order to have Zoo see play. So this card will see play, in my opinion, if Zoo comes back, but I don't think we have enough tools for Zoo. Defile. I'm so excited for this card. This card has so many applications. This is an instant slot in Reno Lock, right? It's going to be fantastic against pirates because you have patches, you have the other pirates that have 3 costs. This essentially is a counter pirate warrior deck. This is tech against all the token style decks, and this will be very, 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 very good against those. You'll see a couple plays where you have to do it against a control deck, playing it against that. You gotta line the trades up and everything, but this is mainly an anti-aggro tool. You're gonna see some OTK memery with this, and I'm going to definitely try this out. You play Patron, you Elven Archer, your Patron, you play Knife Juggler, and then you play the new minion that puts immune on it, then you Defile. I think you need 2 Thaurissan Ticks, and that's an OTK. So that'll be cool. But realistically, it has some really good applications besides that memery. Drain Soul, Lifesteal, deal 2 damage to a minion. Yeah, I don't want to play this card. We have Dark Bomb. Dark Bomb deals 3 damage, and it also goes face. So we don't really, in Reno Lock, you're not really looking too much to get that lifesteal on your Dark Bomb, at least. You're definitely going to want to get some lifesteal, and that'd be cool if you had some of it, but I would rather play Dark Bomb over this. Gnome Feratu, this is a meme card. You can definitely set up some mill capabilities, but your Warlock, you're going to get to fatigue much faster than them. There's no way you build a meme deck around, not a meme deck. It is a meme, but a mill deck around this. Warlock number 2, Treachery. Choose a friendly minion, your opponent gains control of it. So we saw an example of this today in the reveal. I'm not a big fan of it. I don't think that the cards that you want to give your opponent, you have enough of them. And I think you would want to have like 4 Treachery effects before this is good. You currently running 2 in your deck. The utility of the cards that you give to your opponent have to be good enough that you'd want to play them normally, and then giving them to your opponent will be better. Something like Doomsayer, in order for Treachery to be good. Now, I think Doomsayer is the only card that is along that power level with this card. If you have something like Bomb Lobber, that's such a bad card normally that the benefit that you get off of a random Treachery that you have in your deck is outweighed by the negative stuff. Unwilling Sacrifice, choose a friendly minion, destroy it, and have a random enemy minion. Oh, this is the Deadly Shot one. So sometimes you'll see Hunter and like Face Hunter tech in a Deadly Shot. This would be similar to that. If you're playing Zoo and you have a couple little tokens lying around, you kill a token and they have 1 big minion on the board and they kill that. That's the only, you tech maybe 1 of these into a really slow meta if you're playing Zoo. I don't think you see much play of it though. You have Blast Crystal Potion on 4, and that's the best one you'll use for Reno Lock. You won't use this in Reno Lock. Howl Fiend, whenever this minion takes damage, discard a random card. This is a bad card. You don't want to actively... You want to choose when you discard your cards. You don't want your opponent to just go and discard a bunch of them. Great if you finish the quest, right? But if your opponent's smart, they wait and they go and they make you discard your quest, because you can discard the quest after. Oh, they ping your minion, you discard 1, your quest is done, and then the Paladin runs all of their 1/1s into it, and you discard your quest, and you lose the game because discard is not good enough yet. Despicable Dreadlord, at the end of your turn, deal 1 damage to all enemy minions. Solid minion. If you run a Demon Lock deck, you'll play it. That's pretty much all I have to say about it. Blood Queen Lanathel. It's a great card. I think that as a pure body card, it's great. Getting Life Steal is fantastic. This card will fit into any discard deck, but will you ever play a deck that discards cards on a regular basis? Like Zoo, you're not going to play this in a Zoo deck. You're trying to play this in a control deck, and if you're playing control deck, you have a lot of cards in your hand, and you don't typically want to discard cards in control because you can discard your Reno. You can discard your Jiraxis. I don't think that you're going to want to play that. Blood Reaver Gul'dan. Similar to some of the previous heroes, we want to look at this based off of the battle cry and the hero power. So the battle cry, before we get to the hero power, summon all friendly demons that died this game. So normally in like a, what is it, Reno Lock deck, you might play, if you're playing Demon Lock, this would be a fantastic finisher without even going to the hero power. You play like the cruel version of that. You wouldn't even have to play too many of them, right? Because you're getting a 5 armor, which will help out. And you're typically playing stronger demons than the weaker ones. You have the Abyssal Enforcer. You might have already played Jiraxis. But Jiraxis didn't die. You'll have maybe Mal'Ganis, maybe Cruel. So this will be nice in that deck. But with this hero power, Siphon Life, deal 3 damage and lifesteal. This hero power is worth playing, in my opinion, is worth playing the card even if you don't have any demons. One of the issues with Warlock late game is that you can't, your health, right? You'll go to Jiraxis and then you'll lose games because a Mage will go and then they'll burn you out. Your Control Warrior opponent will Grom you and then they'll hit you with Death Spite. So the big thing is that this might be a finisher that you play instead of Jiraxis. Jiraxis is still a great card, but in metas where you are running into a lot of bursty style decks, you're going to want to tech in Blood Reaver instead of Jiraxis. And that's what I'm going to come to this later at the end, but a lot of the things that you'll see in this expansion is tech cards. Can you read the meta? Is this card good enough to tech around a specific situation? All right, Warrior. Animated Berserker. So this might start a tempo warrior style deck in standard, but I don't think that style of deck is going to be good enough. You might fit this in Patron. This will be pretty good in Patron, actually, because you'll get an extra Patron, and then you can do Whirlwind effects. Patron is where you'll find this. Otherwise, there's always OTK memery with this. You take this, you do a Leroy Sudden Genesis. There's going to be an OTK meme with that. Because if you get down, you get this card down to 0, which is very nice. Bring It On. This will be an okay Control Warrior card. You can bait your opponent into playing into a brawl, and if not, they wasted a bunch of mana against you on a brawl. Your opponent, this is typically going to be good against bad opponents. If your opponent knows what cards you have in your deck, like they most likely will, at the higher levels, they're going to play around certain board clears. So, I don't know. This is pretty good against aggro, especially because aggro runs all of their cards out of their hand. So your opponent will be in top deck mode, and you'll just gain 10 armor, and he doesn't have anything in his hand, so it doesn't get reduced. So that'll be pretty good. Dead Man's Hand, shuffle a copy of your hand into your deck. So Control Warrior actually exists in Wild. Standard doesn't exist. Taunt Warrior is better. I think that the variation, you can play Taunt Warrior in Wild, but I think the Control Warrior is probably better because you have Justicar, you have N'Zoth, you have the clears, and this will help you in the control battles. Control Warrior is really good against aggro. You're very good against aggro. You beat Pirate Warrior. That is some of the higher legend players, they counter aggro by Control Warrior. Like specifically, they counter Q with Control Warrior. So this card will help that matchup a little bit, the control matchup, which Control Warrior surprisingly struggles with. I've played Control Warrior a good amount especially recently. And one of the very difficult battles that you'll get into, the matchup that is Reno Mage. Reno Mage will typically beat you in fatigue as a control warrior because they get so much value. With a dead man's hand, you sneak one in, you will outvalue your opponent there. The issue is that it's dead against aggro, but you typically are doing good enough with control warrior and aggro that I wouldn't mind floating a card or two if you're. I don't think you ever want to go infinite with this, but being able to get an extra 5 or 6 cards in your hand, in your deck rather, is what you want to do with this card. Forge of Souls is also, if you go in to do this really long game, Forge of Souls is good. But Forge of Souls is great in any really any slower version of Warrior. Pirate Warrior doesn't want this card because you're not getting something on the board, not getting board control. But in Patron Warrior or in Control Warrior, getting your weapons are pretty good. Even though you can't play your second weapon immediately, you're going to be able to play your first weapon immediately on the next turn, but the second weapon is going to sit around. I've heard people say, oh, your second weapon sits around for a while. Great, but you already drew it out of your deck, so you're not going to draw into it later, so you can start drawing some of your good cards. Forge of Souls, little C play. Mountain Fire Armor. Death Rattle, if it's your opponent's turn, gains 6 armor. So I actually see this as a tech card in Control Warrior that's pretty good against aggro. So your aggro deck is going to be playing for the board turns 1 through 4, 1 through 5, and then they start pushing face. So this card will allow you to either A, control the board because your opponent avoids it to avoid giving you the armor, and you can start making good trades into their minions, or you'll get 6 armor. So I think that you might swap out a, what's the shield block? This is an alternative to shield block, essentially. Because shield block is more, the cycle is good against control decks, because you want to get to some of those late game threats a little bit faster. But in this one, you're contesting board, which is what you really want to do against those aggro matchups. Valkyr's Soul Claimer. Whenever this minion survives damage, summon a 2/2 ghoul. Yeah, too weak. Blood Razor. This is actually a really interesting card because your Patron Warrior is strong. And you're running 2 Death Spites, and everyone's going to say, oh, Blood Razor, it's not Death Spite. Death Spite's too strong. You're not going to run it. But imagine it like this. Imagine if it's around the same level as Death Spite. Would you not want to run 3 or even 4 copies of Death Spite in your Patron Warrior deck? I think you would. So I think you start playing more weapon-heavy versions of Patron Warrior, and now you can start contesting against some of the more aggressive decks because you have a bunch of whirlwind effects. So this is a little bit better with the Patrons because you can get it 1 turn, and then what'll be really cool with this is you'll see combos with this where you go and you'll Blood Razor, you'll get the first whirlwind, and then you'll equip a second weapon on top of it and get the second whirlwind effect. Death Revenant, Battlecry, gain 1/1 for each damaged minion. I don't think that a big board is typically good. A big minion is good against in whirlwind decks. I think that you want to go and spread the board wide. Patron is much better than this card. Alright, on to the legendaries. Rotface. Whenever this minion survives damage, summon a random legendary minion. So this is one of those cards that's going to be good in standard. Like, there's going to be a tempo style of warrior deck, and it's probably going to even shift over to wild. It's probably going to be semi-good, but it's not going to be the strongest version of warrior in that style, Patron. And I don't think that in Patron, you want to be playing a finisher on 8. You want to be able to play Grom and smash him in the face. You don't want to be going for value and playing this card, and then you have to wait for the legendary minion to spawn. I think this is a little bit too slow, because you're going to have to wait a turn to attack with it. And you might get the same stats as Grom, but you don't have the charge. Now the hero. Scourge Lord Garrosh. Battlecry equip a 4/3 Shadowmourne that also damages adjacent minions. The armor gain is very nice here. Synergizes a little bit better than most classes, which is nice. We also have the hero power, Blade Storm, deal 1 damage to all minions. The hero's good in Patron. You're not going to see this much in Control Warrior. In Control Warrior, you just want to keep armoring up. You're going to want to play Justicar. So this is geared more towards that tempo style warrior that we're definitely going to see in Standard. I don't think that like I said, I think that Patron is a little bit better, and you can always sneak this into Patron. I don't think that you ever want to play it in Patron. I think Patron needs to be a little bit more aggressive. I think the aggressive builds are definitely better than the N'Zoth builds. So this card, according to that, probably won't be too good in Patron. I mean, you will see people try it. You will see people try to go and make a control style Patron. I don't think that that will be good enough. I think that Control Warrior is going to be good. I think that Patron, aggressive Patron with Grom as finisher is going to be good. I don't foresee this card making much of an impact. Alrighty, now let's go on to the neutrals. So we're going to start with commons by ascent. We're going to go by rarity by ascending order. So Snow Clipper Penguin, great new 0/1/1 token. So cute though. Arthurus Veteran, Battlecry, given a friendly minion +1 attack. This is similar to the old Argent Squire, or not Argent Squire, Abusive Sergeant. So instead of giving your minion +2 attack temporarily, you get 1 attack. So the permanency doesn't really matter. It's essentially the same effect, a little bit lessened down, because you never went, when you buffed your minion, you either went face with it, or you wait and you made a trade. I don't think that you'd have to have a really low, you have to have a high health minion that you put this on so you can make a better value trade. And I don't foresee that this card would fit into that style of deck. Not good enough for the Zoo decks. I don't like this card. Dead Scale Knight, 1/1 lifesteal. It's a Murloc, lessens the Murloc pool. If you get a random Murloc off of something, off of like a Murloc Knight or something, this is not as good as other Murlocs. Wretched Tiller, whenever this minion attacks, deal 2 damage to the enemy hero. How many attacks do you really get in with a 1/1? You don't get much unless you have a bunch of other 1/1s, and at that point you're playing Paladin. And you have better synergy cards, so I don't think that you're seeing much play with this. Fallen Sun Cleric, give a friendly minion +1/+1. It's the same thing as a normal Sun Cleric. I don't see any benefits of getting this on 2 as opposed to 3. Tainted Zealot, Divine Shield, spell damage +1. Interesting combo, because this can probably stick around for a little bit longer than you'd expect. Having the double hit is definitely interesting. But there's a reason why Thalnos is a legendary 2-mana Divine Shield draw 1, or 2-mana spell damage +1 draw 1, and this is a common. This isn't that good. Tuskar Fisherman, Battlecry, give a friendly minion spell damage +1. As Ben Brode said, this is a better Kobold Geomancer, but you don't play Kobold, so you're not going to play this card. Frost Rider, freeze your other minions. So we have better 3-mana 4/4s in Wilds. You have the Ogre, you have the one that has Death Rattle. None of them see play. This isn't going to see play. This is an arena card. Death Speaker. This is like a pseudo Divine Shield for your minion, but you can't hold on to it. This might actually be pretty good. I mean, this is what's going to cause a bunch of OTKs. This is the card that caused the Dreadsteed nerf. So, I mean, aside from the memes, this isn't going to be good enough to go into a deck, but I'm going to enjoy playing this card very much in the OTK stuff. Cobalt Scalebane. That's out of order. At the end of your turn, give another random minion +3 attack. So this is a dragon, which is interesting. You can draw this off of your, you can draw this off of some Nether Spite shenanigans. makes that pool a little bit worse. I think that you want to play more concise dragons in your dragon deck, like Azure Drake. I don't think that you want to play this card. Verghoul, Death Rattle, if it's your opponent turn, summon a 2/2 Ghoul. Again, with the aggro stuff, your opponent trying to control these types of cards are good when you are even or behind. Because if you're behind, your opponent wants to trade and get board control. But if you're ahead, you're typically the one who wants board control, unless you're smorking. So I think that this is an interesting style of card, but I don't think that Verghoul is good enough to start seeing play, especially in Wild. And you'll hear me repeat that, but it's true. Grave Shambler, whenever your weapon is destroyed, gave +1/+1. Why? If you think you're playing a lot of weapons, this just gets bigger and bigger, but you have better, more efficient cards that you can play. Grim Necromancer, Battlecry, summon 2/1/1 skeletons. Isn't there a dragon in Paladin, or there's a minion in Paladin that does this for 3 mana if you have a dragon synergy, and that's not played, so I don't think that this will be played. Night Howler, whenever this minion takes damage, gain +2 attack. We saw this in the demo today. I'm not particularly impressed. We have the 3/5 Armani that gets buffed when it's enraged. The thing is that this can be stacked multiple times. You might see this in that standard, like I said, the standard tempo warrior, but it's not going to be there. Not going to be in Wild. Venomancer, poisonous, 2 attack, 5 health. So the big body, the 5 health is the important stat here. Because poisonous, you got to consider it to have infinite attack. We don't care about its attack. We care about the health. And this will get through 2, like 3 or 4 cost minions. I think that it might, surprisingly enough, you might sneak this into some ramp druid style deck. This might be good enough to see play, but it's barely on the cusp of it, but it's still a tech card that you could sneak in to some style deck like that. Wicked Skeleton, Battlecry, gain 1/1/1 for each minion that died this turn. So this is similar to the Divine Shield style effect, but a little bit stronger in Paladin. The 4 cost for this just makes it really bad. I would have preferred to have it a 3 attack minion, or the 3 cost minion, and a 0/0. That would have been better. But as is, I don't think this is good enough. Alright, on to the next one. Bloodworm, Lifesteal. This will be good in Hunter. You can play this as a 5-drop. There aren't many good beasts on 5. The best one's like Stranglethorn Tiger, which is pretty good, but Bloodworm will actually, like, as Ben Brode said, they discovered that Lifesteal really increases in power as the mana cost goes up. So like a 1/1 as compared to a 3/3 with Lifesteal, the 1/1 proportionally is a lot less than the 3/3. So I don't know. I think that with the beast synergies, you might see this in a control beast hunter. Ooh, looks like I put that card in twice. Okay, well we'll skip over it. Sunborn Valkyr. Give an adjacent minion +2 health. So the way I look at this card, you have the what is it? The 3 mana 3/4 and Priest, the Talon Priest. That gives you 3 health, and you only need 1 minion on board, and you have it for 2 mana less. This requires you to have an extra minion. I don't think that this is good enough. And Necrotic Geist, this is similar to Thermopylae, the Mechaplug, Thurgeneer, whatever the name of that old legendary was. I don't think that card was good enough, and it was a little bit better because you could kill your own leper gnomes. In Paladin, people are saying that maybe you can sneak this in and then you just get a bunch of tokens and trade them off, but you have better synergies. You have Divine Shield synergies. You have Bolvar synergies. I think that's better. Here we go. Spellweaver. This is an interesting card. The spell damage +2 is really good on the evolved Geomancer. I don't think that having a 6 cost minion is good enough. Bone Mare. Maybe you tech it in like a really heavy control style Paladin because you're going to be able to have a dude on the board at all times. But otherwise, you're not going to see it. Happy Ghoul. Tempo Priest becomes a thing. This is your number one candidate to put in the deck, but Tempo Priest is most certainly not good enough for Wild. Mindbreaker. This is an interesting card for teching against some of these new Death Knight heroes. And I like when Blizzard does this. They've done this in multiple expansions now. Whenever they print something that could potentially go a little bit too far, they put their own counter into it. And the 5 health on this is essentially what solidifies it. If this was a 3 mana 2/4, it wouldn't be good enough. But being able to disable your opponent, it's hard to deal 5 damage. And if you really do that, you're spending more than 3 mana's worth to do it. But so essentially you're valuing your hero power over a lot of the other things on the board, and at that point you're losing board control. So I think that this will be teched in if the Paladin Death Knight becomes super popular, maybe you tech this in, but you'll have to wait until you ooze the weapon, or he finishes the weapon before you play this. But I don't foresee the Paladin hero becoming any good. All right, Shallow Gravedigger. You have better cards. Keening Banshee, when you play a card from the top 3. So this one is similar to Fel Reaver in the thought that you remove the cards from your deck, but you control it in this situation as opposed to your opponent. I don't believe that 1 extra attack constitutes this effect, because a vanilla 4 minion is a Yeti, and that 1 extra health, while it is important because it will go and it will kill a lot of 5 health minions, which is important, but I don't think it constitutes that effect. It's not good enough for a constructed deck. Phantom Freebooter. You're not running this in Pirate Warrior. That list is too refined. You have to have some mid-range weapon deck, and yeah, I don't think that that's going to exist. You're just going to have so many finishers like Patron that this card's just not going to be good enough. So the 4 mana Taunt Battlecry, summon a copy of this minion. I think that here, this card is this is worse than other cards that you'd put into Egg Druid. In Egg Druid, you can put 2 cards together to make this. You'll have the Ooze, the Echoing Ooze, and the Taunt card, the 2 mana Taunt +2/+2. And those together make this. But one of the big things about those 2 cards is that they have flexibility to be played independently. You don't have to wait till 4 mana. You can play them both on 2. You can play them on 3 with a 1-drop. You can buff your currently available board. This card's not good enough in Egg Druid in Wild. Taking Abomination. Next card. Corpse Razor. Battlecry, give the minion. Death Rattle. Resummon this minion. So this is Ancestral Spirit on a stick. The advantage that you have in Shaman with this card, with Ancestral Spirit, is that you can get it for 2 mana and you can put it on some really big Death Rattle card. You can put it onto like a Sylvanas. You can put it onto your Kel'Thuzad. This card, while it has the body, the effects will only be able to go on small minions, and I don't think that you already have to have some small minion there. I would prefer to have the Ancestral Spirit over this card. Bone Drake, Death Rattle, out of a random dragon to your hand. This would be good in like a Dragon N'Zoth deck, but most decks that are running late game are only running dragons or only running N'Zoth, because you have the top end for both of them, and running both of them, that's too optimistic. All right, on to the epics. We have Drakari Enchanter. Your end of turn effects trigger twice. So this is very, very important in Wild. We have a lot of cards that, if you're looking at a big scale, we have a lot of cards that are really important that have the end of turn effects. Like you have Ragnaros, you have Emperor Thaurissan, and that's what everyone probably thinks of immediately with this card. But there are a couple really crappy cards that no one ever plays and no one ever thinks of, like the Young Priestess, like I don't even know the name of the card. It's the 2-mana 1/3 that gives attack to other minions. And those, while one tick of them is typically mediocre in Arena, and you might be able to build a deck around this type of effect, especially because it's an epic, right? Normally, when you have the type of cards that double your effects, you have Bran and you have Baron Rivendare, and they're legendaries because their effects are so strong. Well, this is an epic, so you can put 2 of them in your deck, and the consistency is much greater that you will draw them. So I think that you could probably sneak this into a zoo deck. You got to rearrange the entire build a bit, and you put in some, what we would consider right now, suboptimal cards. But, I mean, the buffs that you could get off of this would be really, really interesting. I want to try something out like that. That's probably my non-meme build deck that I'm going to try to test out this expansion. Corpse Taker, Battle Cry, gain taunt if your deck is a taunt minion, repeat for Divine Shield, Lifesteal, win free. A very interesting effect. Everyone says Shaman, oh, you'll play it with Alakir. No one plays Alakir, so you're not playing this card. You also don't get the charge, which is the most important thing of Alakir, with all the all the buffs and everything, but the charge is the most important part, so there's no reason to play that in Shaman. The only place you'd play this is in Paladin, and well, the current Paladin builds, you have Tyrion, you have Wicker Flame, Burn, Bristle. So that typically covers every single one except Wind Fury. You're not going to sneak Wind Fury into this. You don't need Wind Fury on this. This is good enough with a taunt and a Divine Shield as is. I think 4-mana 3/3 taunt Divine Shield would be barely playable in like a Divine Shield's synergy Paladin deck. So being able to snag a Lifesteal would be pretty good too. I'm not sure if this makes the cut. This will be on the cusp. This may be in the deck. There's just too many good 4-drops. You have Consecrate, True Silver in Paladin. This will be interesting. Maybe it'll nudge something out. We'll have to see. So Death Axe Punisher, give a random Lifesteal minion in your hand +2/+2. So we got a new hand buff effect, but it's exclusive to Lifesteal minions. So if you're running a lot of Lifesteal, this will be good, especially looking back at what Broad said, how they've seen specifically, and when Blizzard says something like that, that they've seen the attack and health go up not proportionally with Lifesteal. As the attack increases and the defense, it doesn't increase proportionally, it increases higher than that. This makes me believe that the card will be better than good, but you're not going to be running an all Lifesteal deck. This is an Arena card. Meat Wagon. I don't know about this card, man. Everyone's thinking about all these crazy combos. I don't know what I'd try to do with this, but this isn't going to find itself into any meta deck. Rattling Rascal, summon a 5/5 skeleton. This is like the equal effect, like Bomb Lobber. Bomb Lobber doesn't see play because the Death Rattle is very negative, and the type of decks you typically want to play Death Rattles in, it synergizes poorly with. Yeah, I don't think this will be any different than that type of card. It'll be similar to Bomb Lobber. Tomb Lurker, add a random Death Rattle minion that died this game to your hand. So the big thing about this is that it can also summon one of your opponent's Death Rattle minions, not just your own. So if you want to synergize around getting a big Death Rattle minion back, well, you're in tough luck because we're in Wild, and your opponent played a Haunted Creeper on turn 2, and getting a Haunted Creeper is not what you want to get from this. Not going to see play. Furnace Fire Colossus. Discard your weapons from your hand and gain their stats. I mean, if you run a deck, the only time I see this being played is if you want to run a mid-range weapon deck that runs like 7 or 8 weapons, maybe more, and then you go and you play that pirate that gets buffed by your weapons and this card. But I don't think that the synergies are good enough. Nerubian Unraveler, spells cost 2 more. So I think this card is clearly worse than Loatheb, but the mirror effect sucks as well because it's your spells. Your opponent can clear the minion and then play spells. So if they have a board, typically you want to play your Loatheb against like, I don't know, like an Egg Druid or something when they have a gigantic board, and then so they can't Savage Roar on turn 7 or something. This doesn't help in that situation because your opponent will just trade into this and then they can play the spells afterwards. It does last longer, so if you're closer in, if it's a more even game and you can drop this down, essentially Loatheb will get a 2-turn effect, but then you're damaging yourself. And unless you're just building up your board, it's not good. I don't think this card will see play. Maybe it's a tech card, but Loatheb's a tech card, and this is a tech card that's a little bit weaker. Skulking Geist. Battlecry, destroy all 1-cost spells in both hands and decks. So, everyone said this Jade Idol counter. The only decks that will really want to counter Jade are Control Priest and Control Warrior, maybe Reno Mage, but you play this not to go to the end of the game, just to stop essentially just to stop them from summoning the really large Jades, because that's how they kill you. They never kill you by going to fatigue, and this just allows you as primarily as a Control Warrior to adjust your game plan where it used to be against Jade Druid to smork your opponent down and go face, but then your Jade, they would play Earthen Scales and then go really high and you'd be screwed. But this allows you to play more of a control style and actually control the board, get rid of the Jade Idols. It doesn't matter if you don't need to play this on 6. You need to play this by turn 10 or something, so that you don't need to, but you can stop their Jade train essentially, and then you can use your resources that you have to go and clear the board. One of the other things to mention is that if you're playing Control Warrior and you're now doing the Dead Man's Hand of putting a bunch of cards into your deck, you can actually go and out fatigue a Druid, but that's starting to look like a pipe dream. It's going to be 1 out of every 20 matchups between this and Jade Druid that specific scenario happens. This is more to just be able to be the more controlling deck in that situation, which I think is good enough to play a 6-mana 4/6 in Warrior. Alright, so we're on to the legendaries. Prince Keliseth, Prince Tel'Daram, and Prince Valinir. So the 2-mana guy, if your card has no 2-cost cards, give all minions in your deck +1/+1. Now, nothing comes to mind in my head. You know what? Nothing comes to my mind in my head that has no 2-cost cards. The only thing that I can think of is something along the lines of maybe like a Control Paladin, but you'd have to cut a Quality. A Quality is the 2-mana card that stops this from seeing play. You can play, there are some Paladin decks that are very controlling that don't play any 2-drops besides a Quality. But if you're playing a style of deck like that, you need to play a Quality because you need the board clear. And unless you can come up with something else, this card doesn't have many applications that I can see, at least. Prince Teleron, I think that this is the one that has the most potential. You have to duplicate something big. Essentially what it is OTK memes. But you get a faceless so you can play it on things that are a little cheaper. And the big thing is that you have Emperor Thorson, so you can play it with like this and Malagos. You can play them together with some enough Emperor ticks. You can play this with Velen with a couple ticks and shoot some spells off. But except in those OTK decks, this legendary, unless there's like a new deck that magically shows up with it, I don't see many uses for it. And Prince Valinar, we also spoke about this on Well Met, and my opinion on the card is that it's a corner case tech card, at least in Standard, for Miracle Rogue. But the issue is that Wild, we have Tomb Pillager, and I believe the build with Tomb Pillager and getting coins and gadgets, because it benefits your gadgets in. So Prince Valinar, while it would be a good lifesteal taunt minion, I don't think that's good enough for Wild. Alrighty, on to the final legendaries of this set. On to Arthas and Arthas, the Lich King. So Arthas is the mini version of the Lich King, 4 mana 2/2, Death Rattle, add a random Death Knight card to your hand. And the Lich King is, at the end of your turn, add a random Death Knight card to your hand. And the taunt is also big here. You can get this off of Stonehill Defender, and it'll probably be as good as Tyrion. It might be as good as Tyrion, and getting it late game. Alright, so here are the Death Knight cards. They're all really powerful. Frostmourne is good. Army of the Dead can be... it's like a Varian Rin on steroids. Losing the spells is bad, but that's no big deal. Doom Pact is great when you're behind, but getting rid of the cards... The effect of getting rid of the cards from your hand is really interesting. I like that. Stealing a minion from your opponent's deck, that's insane, man. I don't know. I like that. I like the effect. It's going to be really tilting sometimes, but it's not... Relatively, it's not a strong effect, but it's a cool effect. And then that effect, the tilt factor, may influence someone to make a poor play. Death Coil, deal 5 damage to an enemy or restore 5 health to a friendly character. That's a very good card. All of these are very, very good cards. So the question is, do you want to play Arthas or do you want to play the Lich King? So Arthas, I don't think Arthas is going to be good enough. We have priests that are playing Potion of Madness. You don't want to get this stolen. This is like the worst card to have stolen by Potion of Madness. So Arthas is in... I don't like Arthas. Let's look at the Lich King. The Lich King, I would want to compare Lich King to Ysera. They have the same amount of raw stats. If you add 16, if you add attack and health. I would say the Lich King is a more aggressive finisher than Ysera. And if you're in a late game, the way that the game has progressed, playing Ysera, you're really only looking for, against aggro, you're looking for Ysera Awakens. Against control, you're looking for like Dream, and the Dragon's going to be good. And maybe you can burst out with the other attack buff, and no one wants the Laughing Sister. I think that these cards here are more impactful than the Lich King. And while Ysera is difficult for people to kill, the Lich King is designed to block the rest of your minions. It's like Curvestone. Essentially, you want to have other things on your board, and then you play the Lich King. And obviously it's the same thing with Ysera, but Ysera is just difficult, and your opponent's going to try to ignore your Ysera and go face. The Lich King protects you from having your opponent go face. And while it's a little bit easier to kill, a giant 8/8 is still pretty difficult to kill, especially in some of the aggressive decks. I think you're going to see some Lich King play. Definitely if there's a Taunt Druid. Might see it teched in Control Warrior as a late game card. I'm definitely going to try that. You might see it in Paladin. The issue is that you already have Tyrion. I think Tyrion is a little bit better because of the immediate presence of the weapon if it dies and the Divine Shield. But if you want to run an additional late game threat in Paladin, Lich King is good. You also might want to play the Death Knight though, so think about that. But otherwise, I think that's pretty good. So that pretty much wraps up the review. When we're looking through this set, a lot of things that you see are conditional. You'll have some cards that will go and be good in specific metas and bad in the other ones. And I feel as more cards get released to the wild set, it becomes more of a deck builder's paradise. Someone who can read the meta will have an advantage better than someone who got yesterday's net deck. Someone who's able to adapt is typically going to be a little bit better than someone who doesn't. And because there are a lot of really good tech cards that you can play in Wild now. You have the anti-Jade counter, you have Defile and Warlock, and that's an anti-aggro card if you use it properly. But you can also go and you can tech your decks against mid-range and control decks if your pocket of the meta is specifically bad. That's what Wild ultimately becomes. Your matchup is going to be your matchup. Freeze Mage against Control Warrior is always going to be bad. But if you can go and sneak those extra percentage points in by playing the correct tech card, by reading the meta properly, you're going to be better. You're going to be better than your opponents. Alrighty, well, that pretty much wraps it up. I really enjoyed doing this card review. It took a little bit longer than I expected. But yeah, subscribe to me on Twitter, DannyDonuts_HS. Leave a like, follow, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Alrighty, adios.